Hi, folks. Thanks for joining our Monday Mindshare. Today, we're going to be talking all about 5K and 8K, 10K, cross country, basically off-season fun runs to really tune up either your speed during the season or during the off-season to help elevate our cognitive mood. And this is a big deal, of course, in the winter where a lot of gray skies, it's cool, we're indoors a lot. How do you keep your mood high and your outlook positive, etc.? At the same time, during in season, how do we use some of this short racing to really tune our leg turnover, our cadence, our performance, and our anaerobic metabolism? Well, recently I've done a few 5K, 8K. I got my shirt on today, turkey trots, etc., and a lot of reminiscing, of course, of my high school days in cross country. It's really fun. It's fast. And it certainly ignites the mind. Well, yeah, it's true that during the winter, of course, dopamine levels do come down. And how can exercise help us to upregulate that? But it does need to be, it seems, on some of this more higher intensity form to really support that. And today I want to talk about just some of the fueling aspects when you think about really shooting for some, PBs during our 5K and 10K runs and races. And we were recently out in Austin this week, and this was for the running event, and just an awesome event. Some video here from Marnie on the Move, just some of the video she took while she was out there, and also some of the video that was taken of the national cross country champs that were put on by Brooks. And it was just really awesome to see the speed and the fluidity and the poetry of fast racing, endurance running. And it's been a while since I've watched that real time and face to face, if you will, in a real setting. It was just really a privilege to see it again. And it really, I think, ignites your passion for endurance sports in many respects. Well, yeah, I grew up in high school cross country, very different training, of course, very different running gait and race kit. Here's some photos here of running in the Speedos when I was in high school. And as you can see, just the stride length, the gait, the how you're leaning in, etc., compared to on the right-hand side, 250-kilometer 6-day race in 2007. Clearly, you're taking a lot more, holding a lot more in your body. Your stride is very different. Your nutrition is very different. And but yeah, it's a very different, of course, environment. This more high speed, high intensity, short, but certainly still endurance racing. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about it. As we said, one of the aspects of high intensity exercise is that it can upregulate cognitive outlook, mood, and performance. And over the years, as developing our products, SFuels has worked with a number of elites and professional athletes like Dan Plews in 2018, going after the Ironman world record, Hayden Wild and securing a medal at the Olympics and his Xterra World Championships, his winning the series of Super League last year, Matt Kerr taking him from a 10.5-hour Ironman to a world champion age grouper, Zach Bitter breaking the 100-mile world record. Well, these were all projects to understand how nutrition and how we optimized some of the SFuels formulations to support these endurance exercise. And, as we learn from those athletes, we feel like we need to do some work also with more, I would say, high intensity, shorter endurance racing athletes. And we're talking to some professional marathoners and elite cross-country runners just to do that. And this will be about validating the optimal use of products like Primed and Revival and our Race Plus products, etc., and really focused at cognitive functions, rate of perceived exertion, understanding physiological performance and recovery. And this is a study here that it actually looks at a review of literature, like a number of studies, if you will, and trying to understand a little more about what is it about high intensity exercise that really, if you will, has this upregulation effect on cognitive performance. And, it was suggesting in this study, and there's a lot of detail in it, but basically, there are a number of candidates or factors that are contributing to this kind of upregulation of cognitive outlook and performance. That can be just the cerebral blood flow increasing to the brain, the oxygenation of the cerebral area. You're just increasing the metabolism of energy, if you will, the production, the consumption of energy in the brain. The neuromodulation and the neurotransmitters is getting into the effect of dopamine and how that has a neurotrophic effect on the brain, a very positive effect on the brain. And these are all elements that contribute to this, like I said, upregulation from a cognitive perspective. And this is, as I said earlier, a great thing in the winter, in the colder months, but also in the middle of in season, in terms of really just tuning your mood and outlook in this lifestyle that we enjoy and love. Well, some of the studies that we've been looking at that support some of this, we'd kind of tracked some of these before, and this was really thinking about the function of some of the nutrients and compounds that can affect, if you will, physical and also cognitive functions in this high intensity endurance sport like 5K, 10K running. I would say the same applies for 200 meter, 100 meter, 400 meter pool swimming, and also obviously track cycling. So all of these apply high intensity sports. And this is less about, of course, that they're so short in nature. It's less about, if you will, getting into a fuel shortage. And still, absolutely, if you can process fat at very high intensities, that is really important here, in that it will support not just the fueling of the muscle, but it will do that in a much lower lactate production metabolism, which is obviously a good thing in the spirit of these short, high-intensity bursts. But also, of course, how we oxidize carbohydrate effectively is critical, again, in the nature of this target of performance sport. You need shorter, I should say, races. And these, 5K races can be, for probably, I would say, middle of the pack, 20 minutes, and then you get into, the elites, they're down in the mid-teens. And then 10K, of course, the real kind of milestone there is breaking 30 minutes for a lot of people. That's really fast. But they're not extended periods of time, they're very short amounts of time. So what's critical in that is how the body, of course, manages things like lactate. How do we manage, the rate of perceived exertion? How do we, slow down that perception of this is hard? The exertion of the exercise is really difficult. How do we slow down that increasing mental outlook? And a lot of this, of course, is to do with some of those neurotransmitters like dopamine and what have you. How do we minimize lactate rising too fast? And I don't want to take away from the baseline of just raw training and the nature of training. A lot of zone 4 work, still zone 2 work, sure, but a lot of zone 4 work to really help process and metabolize lactate, and even how we use ammonia. And I won't go into it in this particular video, but we've talked about it before, the role of glutamine in really shuttling ammonia out of the body. Ammonia also has an effect, a fatigue effect on the mind as it rises as a function of high intensity exercise. But I won't go too much deeper into that. We will talk about the caffeine firstly. And, again, what's important with caffeine is to understand it in training and racing from a measured dose perspective, so the baseline of what you're working with. And we've said in other videos that as much as coffee and tea obviously has caffeine, it is extremely varied on the amount, as many variables associated with brewing, different techniques of brewing, different sources of the bean, of how the bean is roasted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a measured dose of caffeine, a lot of these studies sit in the 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight dosage formats for this acute use of caffeine specifically. around improving physical performance for high intensity exercise and the mood dimensions, the cognitive functions. Here's the study here that talks a little bit about the dosage and the use of caffeine in elite and recreational runners and what that does in terms of, improving anaerobic performance, which is obviously what we'll get into quickly in these high intensity bouts. But also it has a number of effects on the mood dimensions of these athletes, and specifically around vitality and vigor and how you come at these events. What is interesting in the recent run with Zach, 5K run out at Austin, was it's been quite a while since I felt like I took a specific effort before the race started on warming up, because a lot of the half Ironmans and the ultras, etc., you can use the swim or you can use the first 5K as part of the warm-up. You got miles and miles to go. But of course, in a 5K, Zach kind of reminded me, hey, let's go and do a warm-up. And it's really important in this in terms of getting obviously the metabolism primed and even getting the cognitive functions primed. But also when we think about vitality and vigor, that you're starting at a high intensity out of the blocks at the starting line, a warm-up is really important, as much as to get the blood flowing, to get the capillary beds opening up in the muscles, to get the blood and the oxygenation happening before the gun goes off. This is important. Now let's just take another look at a study here on caffeine, and this was similarly looking at mood and the profile of vigor, or if you will, confidence going into these races. And again, this study was showing that we could lower the rate of perceived exertion through the use of caffeine. Again, this was in this 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, so fairly high. What was interesting in this, it was a comparison against sucrose, and I think this is really important, is that again, for this race, this type of a short, high intensity race, it's less about, trying to take in forms of fuel and substrate, because quite frankly, the last thing you want to do is to be having competition in the body between blood going to the gut and bringing nutrients out of the gut, and blood going to the muscles, of course, not just give them the oxygen, but also take the lactate away. You want all of the blood, or a lot of the blood, if you will, on the muscles to support that function first. So I think, really taking away for this short, intense racing, really, caffeine, and we're going to talk about taurine in a second, really important aspects to support this type of racing. Less about, like I said earlier, piling in a bunch of substrate, meaning fuels, for such short duration, high intensity racing. But anyway, this study was bringing out, like I said, lowering the RPE as a function of caffeine dosage, and having these both physical domain or dimensions of impact and improving impact in RPE, and also some of the psychological aspects. Now, one of the other nutrients that we're interested in, and I will start by saying firstly that it is really empirical observations, and it wasn't really something that we had focused on before, but in recent use of our second generation SFuels primed, in recent half marathons, 5K, 8K, high intensity, faster, short races, there was a surprising and like a quite noticeable lowering of post-race inflammation as a function of delayed onset muscle soreness, basically muscle soreness, range of movement, and just speed to recovery post-race on getting back into training. And it's just an observation. And we were just intrigued at how that supported a much more rapid return to, like I said, more ease of range of movement, lower muscle soreness, etc., all indicative of lower inflammation. And when we started looking into this, and we look at specifically the taurine aspect of our primed formulation, there are some interesting studies that are beginning to point to aspects of taurine that would suggest it is having an effect on some of these inflammatory responses to high intensity exercise. And in fact, this study first was specifically on 5K high intensity running and looking at the more classical mediators or biomarkers of inflammation, like creatine kinase, like interleukin 6 or IL-6, and also several others. And it was showing that, with taurine, there was an observation that there was a decreased inflammatory load or response, if you will, of decreased interleukin 6. And also a few other associated enzymes associated with inflammation, like aspartate, transaminase, etc. Now, there is some, I would say, conflicting research that is not so much showing that there is not an effect of taurine on inflammation, but they're finding that there were other aspects of inflammation that taurine seemed to be having an effect on. And specifically, they were calling out muscle damage and oxidative stress that taurine was really affecting rather than inflammation. So it does feel like a little that the jury's still out a little bit on how taurine is having this effect on post-running, I'll say inflammation, but it may not explicitly be inflammatory processes. And I just feel like there's more study required here. And like I said earlier, we're going to look at doing some more work with athletes involved in this shorter duration, high intensity endurance racing, whether that is on the track, whether that is cross country, whether that is half marathon, which obviously is not that short in a marathon. But we're going to basically try to understand this much better. Bottom line is high intensity, short duration sport. Obviously, it'll tune up your speed for your longer races, but also, of course, in these winter months where it's a little gray outside, a little dull, it will upregulate your mood, your positive outlook. Hopefully, some of these ideas around the use of caffeine and taurine that's in our SFuels Prime will help you to really go after said new PBs in those races, and also for you to test and validate for yourself how these different dosages, it's a little higher, the dosage we're talking about here, than, if you will, our dosage for upregulated fat oxidation for long distance, endurance sport, whether that's triathlon, ultra running, ocean swimming, etc. But generally, most of these studies are suggesting 5 milligrams per kilogram body weight. And that's, that is really, 3 to 4 of these, depending upon your body weight, of course, but of these prime sachets as you go into these races. And I would suggest, like we said, is get back to basics on your warm-up prior to these races, so that you've had your caffeine and your taurine dosage and your warm-up prior to the gun going off, that you can hit these races in your most prime form and really, test for the impact and the change in outlook, mood, vitality, performance, and recovery. And hopefully you can have some fun with that. Well, look, all the very best for your winter season, and all of those who are in the summer season down the Southern Hemisphere. Hopefully you can try some of this effort to really tune up your cadence and your performance and your leg turnover on the track or in this, short races, 5K, 8K, to help you in your longer races. All the best in your training and racing all around the world. And as for now, and like always, go longer. Thanks again for joining us here at SFuels. Have a great week.